Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Jason Granzotto from Tri Health Wellness Center. I'm joined today by Robert Beer, a mental performance consultant and co-owner of Mindset First Mental Health and Performance. Robert is a former elite tennis player and NCAA athlete. His journey through elite level athletics has provided Robert with motivation, experience, and understanding of performing under pressure and how to deal with stress of performance. Welcome, Robert.
Thanks a lot, Jason. I appreciate you having me in here. I'm excited to chat a little bit today.
For sure. I want to start by asking you, why don't you tell me a little bit about what is the most common stumbling blocks your athletes encounter?
Yeah. So, look, there's a bunch, right? Because just being an athlete and trying to perform at a particular level consistently can get very, very stressful in general. But probably one of the main ones that I see is just overanalyzing, overthinking,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, especially with younger athletes and kind of like the youth, we'll say group, right? You have a lot of these athletes going out there and trying to compete with this overanalysis of technique or the goal that they're trying to achieve, right? So
Mm-hmm.
uh, you have all these kids being confused because what do I focus on, right? Dad's telling me this, coach is telling me this, my teammates suggesting this. So now my brain is on absolute overload.
Yeah.
Um, I'm thinking about this technique, that technique. I'm trying to think about, if it's a soccer player making the right runs, I'm trying to keep my head up. I'm trying to do 1,000 different things at the same time. And then on top of that, majority of these athletes are thinking, okay, well, now I got to start thinking about if I win, what happens when I get off the field, the court, the ice rink? Do I get, do I get absolutely destroyed by mom or dad, coach, right? Is it going to be a pleasant car ride?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to have to deal with that conversation after,
Right.
right? And a lot of these athletes, unfortunately, because of this entire process of overthinking, overanalyzing every little bit of their performance, it leads them to quitting. It leads them to being very unhappy, right? It leads to a lot of development of performance anxiety and nerves and panic, and for some athletes, depression, depending on
Yeah.
how to deal with things and what kind of support they have, right? But yeah, probably overanalyzing is I'd say the biggest one. It's up there. It's something I dealt with a lot for sure.
Just on that, what do you suggest as maybe like a tip or something that you offer your athletes as a way to like kind of get out of their head when they're
Yeah.
performing?
So while they're performing, I like to set like micro goals, right? And I like to have my athletes set 1, 2 max per competition or game or whatever it is. Um, and the micro goals are all about things that you can 100% control. And for a lot of the time, actually, I want to say probably all the time, they're primarily things that have to do with the mental aspect of it. So I try to stay away from overanalyzing or focusing on technique, on outcomes, or anything like that. I really try to get them to focus on, okay, let's focus on my attitude and my thought process, right? So I've made a mistake. If my initial thought is, oh, you suck, right? No, let's change that. Let's focus on changing that. That's your goal. That's your micro goal for this competition. I suck. No. I made a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. How do I correct it? Okay, I've come up with the way to correct it. Let's move on now. Let's try it again.
Sure.
Right? And it's a very proactive type mentality that way, and it doesn't get overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, and it's pretty cool too because it doesn't. There's no instant consequence, if you will, right, to that goal
Mm-hmm.
that you're trying to achieve, being a micro goal and being a goal that only you can deal with. It doesn't impact anybody else, or it's not impacted by anybody else. So it's not something that mom and dad can see,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not something that your coach can see. You're trying to work through it on your own, and I think that gives athletes a lot of comfort as well. That it's just you, right? It's just you, and nobody else can kind of squeeze in there and do anything with or impact it in any kind of way.
Right. Um, what would you recommend for either coaches or parents that either they get in the habit of maybe critiquing their athlete's performance, or not knowing how to respond after maybe them not meeting their expectation?
Hmm. Um, I would probably say for parents, let's start because they're two very different responses, right? So with parents, uh, parents are interesting because you walk a fine line when you speak to them on you're telling me how to parent my kid
Mhm.
and you're teaching me something. You walk a very fine line. But what I would suggest for parents is just allow your kids to play the sport they're playing. Like, don't live through them. If you've played that sport, you've had your opportunity. Allow for them to take the opportunity that they are being given, and allow for them to excel in the environment that you've put them in. Right? A lot of times, parents don't understand that the cause of their children's failure when it comes to athletic performance is actually a large byproduct of the way that the parents themselves respond or
Mhm.
act in accordance to what the kid's doing.
Right.
So allow them to do what they need to do. Allow the coaches to be coaches, right? The kid doesn't need for you to tell him how to fix something. That's what the coach is for, right? Parents need to understand that their only job through athletics is support and sustainability. Kid can't pay for his things, obviously, right? So we need the financial help and the positive psychological support, right? It doesn't need to be you're amazing, you're the greatest thing that ever happened on this planet, but it's just about providing the kid with positive reinforcement, right? Discussing things, not yelling at them and telling them they suck or they're not going to make this team or that. It's a conversation. And one of the saddest things that I see with athletes is the athlete feels like they cannot go and speak to their parent about something. And I think that's heartbreaking, right? Now, in terms of coaches, coaches need to understand that being an athlete, there's a lot of pressure being put on them, especially as you get higher in levels and older. Right? The expectations become higher, the goals become bigger. So they need to remain realistic in what they're asking from their athletes. I see a lot of coaches say like, oh, "You're a forward, like go on and assist the game." Like, sorry, who do you think this kid is? Right? Some of the guys in the NHL don't get a goal and assist the game. Right? So again, like adjusting the parameters of what you're asking from your athletes, and then understanding that yeah, they're athletes, and a lot of time I guess they're portrayed as alpha male kind of thing, but everybody's got thoughts and emotions, right? And you tearing some kid apart in the change room, you think it's setting an example for other people, but what you've just done is you've damaged one kid and damaged the morale of the team, and also now everybody's scared. There is no athlete that performs well or at their peak when they're full of fear,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just a cycle that leads to the failure, really,
Sure.
um, and later damage, psychological damage.
Right. I also want to know a little bit more about the role that pressure plays in your athlete's ability to perform, especially up to their potential.
Yeah, so look, I'm sure a majority of people know this, right? You have external and internal pressure. Now, um, a lot of people will deal with pressure in different ways. However, um, let's just assume that an athlete doesn't have the tools to deal with that pressure. What will, for majority of time, happen is they will develop some kind of fear. They will develop some kind of anxiety that's obviously coupled with doubt. When that starts to happen, confidence levels drop, and then you have a kid who has this ton of potential but will never show. Right? There's always the fear of making mistakes, losing, what can happen after the outcome. Right? So you have that kind of those two components that come together. Now, primarily, it's the external pressure that causes majority of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the pressure from parents. It's the pressure from coaches. Sometimes it's a perceived pressure by the athlete. Pressure that's actually sometimes not even there. I have tons of athletes who say, "Oh, but mom's gonna get mad. But mom's never been mad before."
Mm-hmm.
right? Or dad's gonna tear me a new one, but dad's never done that before, right? So it's this perceived pressure. And look, to a certain extent, it's from the willingness to want to make your parents proud, coaches proud, right? You want those around you to say, hey, like you've done well, and I think that's a very natural, want for somebody, right? To feel appreciated, to feel um, loved and respected from that regard. Internal pressure is great until it becomes a perfectionist mentality, right? Until we get to the point where the athlete then becomes very unrealistic with their expectations and the realism of what can actually be accomplished at that particular moment goes right out the window, right? Actually, I spoke to an athlete earlier today, and it was a question of, I said, what do you deem your training sessions, or how do you rank your training sessions when it comes to saying it was good or bad? And the athlete was like, well, if it's good, then I feel great. I'm energetic. I've hit all my times. This is a runner. I've hit all my times, all my trials. So I'm saying, I'm asking, I'm saying, so essentially you're trying to be perfect. That's what you're deeming as good. I'm like, yeah, of course. So, okay, so what do you deem as bad? Well, if one of those things is off, well, I think that there's a gray area here. I think that your threshold of what is good and what is bad needs to really change, right? Uh, if one thing doesn't go right, you cannot possibly assume that that is a bad training session or bad competition. So internal pressure to push, to want to be better, to work hard, to have effort, to have the right attitude, phenomenal, right? That brings out coachability. It brings out, effort's obviously such a big thing. It brings out all these positive qualities until we get to that I want to be perfect mentality. And that takes a long time to break for some athletes, and getting them to understand that that's not actually a real concept, right?
Right. What's something that an athlete can do to just improve their confidence in themselves overall, and maybe highlight something that is perhaps outside of competition or outside of like personal goals on
Yeah.
the
So
field?
I would probably say you start with your self-talk,
Mm-hmm.
right? You start with the things that you are saying to yourself on a daily basis. It's really the most simple thing. It's really the thing that happens the most, right? Like, I don't know. When I try to think of just throughout my day, there's too many instances where you have small internal conversations, right? Whether it's responding to thoughts, responding to situations, whatever it may be. So starting there, right? Changing the way in which we speak to ourselves is a massive, massive thing. And for a lot of people, it takes years, right? I asked somebody today, I said, like, why do you have such a difficult time being kind to yourself? And I don't know. And I said, would you say those things to somebody else? Absolutely not. Okay, so then why are we saying it to ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? So starting there and trying to um, restructure our thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
right? Wording and tone are very, very important. So, instead of saying, oh my God, I have such a hard workout on Thursday. I don't know how it's gonna go. We can say, hey, I'm really excited to go out there and crush this workout on Thursday. I can't wait to see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
We're really kind of saying the same thing, just in a very different way, right? And both those thoughts will have completely different psychological responses, which obviously then lead to increased moods or decreased moods, motivation, so on and so forth. Right? So yeah, a tip would be take some time to understand the things that you were saying that are negative to yourself, why,
Mm-hmm.
and then try to start to change the language that you use with yourself.
Yep.
Right? It's a really, really big thing, and for everything, right? So that's just really a everyday life type thing, right? Whether it's a test, you go into a test. If you say, oh, I'm going to fail this, well, chances are you probably won't do so well. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great because you're giving people an insight into like how to perceive something that's upcoming. A
Yeah,
lot of my
absolutely.
patients, most of their, if we're treating anxiety, a lot of anxiety is anticipatory, meaning
Mhm.
I think this is going to happen. This may happen in the future. I have something coming up, whether it's an event, a test, a competition, you name it. And it's already a perceived fear that what if the worst case scenario plays out? And a lot of the times our anxieties are based on what if I fail? What if? And you get focused on that. So, what are some things that maybe you may encourage your athletes not to do before they have a competition?
Yeah, so I would probably the main one is to avoid focusing on the outcome.
Mm,
Um, I always use the metaphor or the comparison of a race, right? Um, if you're going into a competition or a race and all you're focused on is crossing the finish, like what it will be like when you get to the finish line,
mhm,
you've missed the process,
right.
right? You've missed the entire race. Um, the end of competition is inevitable, and I think this is something that a lot of us forget. Right, the end will happen at some point or another. One way or another, you're going to get there. Now, how you get there will influence whether that outcome is in your favor or not.
Mhm.
Can't control the outcome, but you can definitely influence it through the things you do throughout the process, right? Um, so I would really encourage people and athletes to really focus on the process itself, right? Attitude, effort. It could be those micro goals that you're setting in. It could be just trying to problem solve. It could be throughout the competition you're really focused on your deep breathing and your self talk and your thought process and your perspectives and just kind of communication. It can be so many different things, but those are the things we should be focusing on rather than, oh, what happens if I win or lose?
Right.
Right? Win or lose will just focusing on winning or losing will only make you more anxious, more nervous, right? You in golf, right? There's a massive research on the yips, right? The yips are just you're choking under pressure because your mind has taken that extra level and said, "Oh, I'm about to win or I'm about to lose," and what's going to happen if, right? So just like you mentioned before, it's anticipatory,
Yeah.
right? You're losing you're well not losing but you're coming out of the present moment, right? And if we can stay in the present moment and take it incrementally little by little, it becomes manageable and we really do perform much better in those increments, which obviously it's like a puzzle, right? Each piece coming together, you then end up having a great performance overall because you've done the little things right consistently.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
that's yeah.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. Um, one more question I want to ask, because I have
Yeah.
actually a lot of young athletes that are coming in, and they have a lot of distractions. I mean, we should talk to them about, the distraction from that interfere with their schoolwork. But being an athlete, you've got an extra layer of you got your schooling, you've got your home life, and you got to make time for probably even a lot of practices and game time during the week. And there's a growing concern with the role of like video games and this type of distraction that is hurting, the potential of some of these young athletes that are, they have goals and they're told that they're really good, but then, they get home and they spend 7, 8 hours after practice just vegging out in front of the computer or on the console. So what kind of tip or what advice would you have for these young athletes that they find that they're getting kind of bogged down with some outside gaming that might be interfering with their progress?
Yeah, so actually, um, there's I guess two schools of thought, right? Gaming is bad, gaming is good. That's pretty much kind of to simplify it. I think I land somewhere in the middle. Some people use gaming as a disconnect, right? A mental disconnect from things that cause them stress or pressure. And that is fine as long as it's used in moderation,
Okay.
right? Um, an hour here and there, right? Like that's totally fine. But like you mentioned, if you're coming home and you're sitting there for 6 7 hours, there's a problem. And I think the primary reason for the problem, you mentioned these kids have goals. Yes, they all have goals. Everybody's got goals. The biggest issue is, and it's the biggest reoccurring issue that I see is people love to set goals for these kids, yet nobody gives them the steps as to how to achieve that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So okay, I want to get a Division I scholarship somewhere in the South. Okay, fantastic. And that's where it's left off.
Yeah.
Or they'll say you need to train hard, and that's where it's left off. Well, no, this is a teenager you're talking to, right? When I was a teenager, I didn't go home and break down that goal and say, okay, what are the steps I need to take? What are my timelines? What do I need to do? So I think something that would really help these kids is having a concrete plan, a blueprint, a map, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my end goal is here, but my small goals along the way, my steps, are what get me to that goal,
Right.
to that end goal, right? Okay, so as an example, you know, goal one is to practice uh, 5 to 6 days a week. Okay, well, under that goal, let's come up with some steps. Okay, day one, I'm going to be working on X, Y, and Z. Day two, I'm going to be working on this. Day three, right? So really have it laid out for you. Okay, I want to improve this. Okay, what's the timeline? Right, and this goes into smart goal setting and all of that, but it's just important to have that laid out for you, because a lot of these kids will come in and say, I have these goals, and I'm like, okay, how are you going to get there? Oh, I don't know, I work hard, I guess, right? And that tells me everything. You have an idea, but you have no guidance or direction.
Sure.
So you're still confused whether you have that goal or not.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a really, really big thing. They need to have those goals, and I think that would reduce the amount of time that they go home and I don't know what to do, so I'm going to play video games.
Yeah, I think kids don't do well with unstructured time. Actually, probably adults don't do well with that either.
Yeah, people
And
in general,
earlier,
right?
earlier you had said something about maybe give yourself one or two goals or things to achieve in a given amount of time or in an event, practice, whatever it may be. So, and I that's one of the advice or philosophy I offer people is like, instead of trying to accomplish 8, 9 things on your list today, do one, accomplish one, because it may not seem like a lot, but you do get, there's a reward system. And when you do something and you can check that off the list, that's an accomplishment. That's a little trophy for yourself. So, and we need to reward that, because that is like, that's such great positive feedback, even though in the beginning, you'll say, well, I have 8 more things on this list. So what? I just did the easiest, shortest thing. Well, you have to start somewhere. And
Yeah.
I find that when you're able to just even commit yourself to one accomplishment a day, you do have the increased likelihood of achieving more, doing more, and making more progress in the direction of what you're hoping for, because you've already taken away one of the stumbling blocks of like getting started. And
Right.
that is one of the key procrastinators for excelling at something, or even just starting to learn how to progress, is I just didn't start yet. I don't know how. I don't know where. And sometimes you're just going to dive in, do one aspect, and you find that you just become more proficient, and the desire to push things away disappears, because now you're getting rewarded. You're feeling good because you've accomplished something, and it leads to another goal, another accomplishment.
Yeah, for sure. It's a big chain reaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the domino effect, really, right?
Right.
And I think with every single goal that you accomplish, you inadvertently become more motivated
Yeah,
to accomplish another,
for sure.
right? And then, oh, that's two. Okay, let's see if I could do three. Oh, okay, that's three. Oh, let's see, maybe I could do one more,
It's
right? And
complete.
next thing you know, right,
Yeah,
you finished everything.
that's right.
So I think that's a really, really important piece there.
Wonderful.
I think it's
Well,
tough for people to be patient.
patience is key.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robert, for your amazing insight. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, so we can be found at www.mindsetfirst.ca. Also on Mindset First Inc. on Instagram and Facebook. It's the same one, so Mindset First Inc. We're actually super responsive. So whether it's email, phone call, DM on Instagram or Facebook, we're kind of on top of it. So usually pretty easy to reach us.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you everyone for watching, and please do subscribe to the Try Health Wellness Center YouTube channel and get notified when we have Robert back and future guests as well. So take care. Thank you. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Jason. That was great.
I'm just gonna end the recording.